Hello and welcome back to day 2 of my Valentine's series. In case you didn't know, every other day until Valentine's Day I am covering a true crime case inspired by Love Gone Wrong. And in today's video, I will be talking about the case of Tiana Notice. Tiana was described by her family as someone who was born with so much potential. She was absolutely beautiful and intelligent beyond her years. Tiana had 3 brothers as well as a stepsister. She was very close to her family and was well loved by everyone around her. Early on in life, Tiana expressed a great love for the arts. She was always expressing her creativity in some way, mostly through music and singing. Tiana had a huge heart, and one of her biggest passions in life was helping those in need. In college, Tiana even founded a branch of the Roosevelt Institution at her campus. The Roosevelt Institution is a nonprofit organization with a mission to research political issues that face disenfranchised individuals in an effort to create positive political change. In addition to her studies and the nonprofit, Tiana volunteered her time at the Women's Center, focusing on helping those who suffered from an eating disorder and raising awareness about the AIDS epidemic. Tiana started college during her senior year of high school. She went on to receive her bachelor's degree and later was working towards her master's degree. It was Tiana's hope that she would earn her PhD, and she wanted to pursue a career in politics. Tiana was very outgoing and a very kind person. She really liked to meet new people, and because she was in such a good place with school and pursuing her career, she thought that it would be a good time to start dating. But because she was so busy with school, she felt that the best way for her to do this would be by dating online, and so she created an online dating profile, and this is how she met James Carter. James seemed to be a decent guy. He appeared to have his life together with a good job and a very stable and lucrative career. He had said that he owned his own home, and it seemed like a good match for Tiana. Except her mother did not initially think so. She later states that something about James just didn't seem right to her. However, James and Tiana started dating, and all seemed to be well in their relationship. They got along fine, and they enjoyed spending time together. That was until 6 months into their relationship when Tiana learned some pretty dark and disturbing information about James. Although on the surface he seemed perfect, the things that Tiana would soon learn about him made her question what kind of person James really was. It turned out that he had recently been let out of jail on bail after being charged with crimes of domestic abuse. A past girlfriend had reported that James had abused her throughout their relationship. This caused Tiana to look into James even further, and she discovered that the allegations from his ex-girlfriend were not the only offenses James had committed. Most of the allegations against James involved assault in some way. On multiple occasions, James had been convicted of assault. A few years later, James had been convicted of violating his probation. And as if that weren't enough, there were multiple harassment charges against him, as well as restraining orders that he had violated. This came as quite a shock to Tiana because James had seemed really perfect up until this point. It was devastating for her to learn that the man she had been involved with for 6 months was capable of such violent and horrific things. It made her feel like she didn't know him at all. And to make it worse, Tiana soon became concerned and suspicious that James had been cheating on her. With everything she had recently learned, Tiana decided that the best thing to do would be to break up with him. And when she ended the relationship, James did not respond well. He began stalking Tiana and threatening her. He would follow her everywhere she went, and it was really concerning to Tiana as well as those who loved her. Tiana told James that if he didn't stop following and harassing her, she would be left with no choice but to get a restraining order against him. This angered James so much that he quickly turned around and took out a restraining order against Tiana. Lying to police and telling them that Tiana was a threat to his safety and well-being, James told police that Tiana had been the abuser in the relationship. Tiana, of course, denied this and had evidence to prove otherwise, and I couldn't imagine being the victim of stalking and then having your stalker turn around and say that they were the one that needed protection from you. It just shows what a narcissist and manipulator James really was. Despite the restraining order, James continued to harass Tiana. He sent her emails threatening her, where he told her that karma would bite her in the ass and that her punishment was on the way. The emails were very disturbing, and given that James had a history of violence, Tiana felt that she had more than enough evidence to prove to police that James was a threat to her. She took the emails to the police, however, they did not take her seriously. Police responded by telling Tiana that they didn't see the emails as a threat, and despite the fact that James had clearly contacted her, even though he had a restraining order against her, nothing happened. The harassment did not stop. James continued to send Tiana emails and called her relentlessly. Tiana sought help from the police multiple times. In fact, Tiana's mother reported that Tiana went to the police 33 different times within a 6-week period, trying to get help and protection. The harassment got even more serious when Tiana found her car vandalized outside of her apartment building. However, once again, the police dismissed this. They said that there was no solid proof that it had been James. Tiana's family became really concerned, and it was frustrating to watch someone they loved be targeted by someone, and to also know that it was not being taken seriously. Tiana's father installed a surveillance camera outside of her apartment, hoping to catch James on camera the next time he tried to harm Tiana in any way. They even practiced a scenario on how Tiana could protect herself should she be attacked. Tiana and her family thought that if they had solid evidence, the police would have no choice but to step in. And so the next day, when Tiana returned home, she found a handwritten note left on her door. The note read, "Tiana, forgive me. I never cheated on you." The note went on to ask for Tiana's forgiveness. Tiana went to check the surveillance footage, hoping that there would be undeniable proof of James leaving the note on her door. But the tape had run out of memory, and so there was no evidence to prove that it had been James that left the note. Still, Tiana took the note to the police, and they finally decided to look into her claims. Police asked James to come in and provide a handwriting sample, but instead of complying with them, James became infuriated with Tiana for reporting him to the police, and this is where his rage turned deadly. The next day, on Valentine's Day, James drove to Tiana's apartment, knowing she would not be home. He hid close enough to her apartment that he would be able to see when she returned, but far enough away that he would be undetected. When Tiana returned home, James ambushed her and began stabbing her. He stabbed her 20 times, and after he attacked her, he fled the scene. Though she was barely hanging on, Tiana was able to call 911. She told them that she had been stabbed by her ex-boyfriend, and the 911 call is so heartbreaking because Tiana knows that she's dying, and I think that the call was made so that Tiana could make sure authorities knew exactly who killed her. Neighbors rushed to Tiana's side, and an ambulance quickly arrived, taking her to the hospital. Sadly, it was too late and the injuries were too severe, and Tiana passed away a few hours after arriving at the hospital. Because of Tiana's phone call, police knew exactly who they were looking for. A search for James began, and he was eventually obtained. Tiana's blood was even on his clothing at the time of his arrest. After he had fled the scene, James called his brother and confessed what he had done. This meant that James's brother would later testify against him in court. James showed absolutely no remorse. He did not even have the decency to stand up in the courtroom. He remained in a separate room and did not even have the courage to face Tiana's family after taking her away from them. James was convicted of her murder and sentenced to 60 years in prison, where he would also serve a subsequent 5-year sentence for violating the restraining order. James's lawyer claimed that the sentence was unnecessarily harsh, but I don't know how anyone could say that when it was beyond evident that James had not only tortured Tiana for weeks by his relentless stalking, but plotted to kill her. The judge was absolutely disgusted by James and his extensive record of abuse and harassment. While in prison, James had the audacity to boast about what he had done to Tiana. James explicitly stated that he did not regret what he did, and even went on to write in letters to his family that Tiana deserved it, and he called her so many degrading names. He also said that not only did he not feel bad about what he did, but he felt as though Tiana's family needed to be taught a lesson. I'm not sure exactly why he felt that way, and it's so sick for someone to even say something like that. More than 40 people showed up for James's sentencing. Most of Tiana's friends and family dressed in purple, which was her favorite color, and they felt that this was the perfect way to honor her because she was such a bright and vivid person. Multiple members of advocacy groups for victims of violence also attended the sentencing. Tiana's family felt that justice was served for her as well as for them. Members of her family have stated that they're doing their best to forgive James, although it has obviously been challenging for them. At the end of the day, Tiana's family is relieved to know that, at the very least, James won't be able to harm anyone else. During the trial, a psychologist testified that James suffered from deep mental health problems. While that is evident and we can all try to have sympathy for someone's struggles, it in no way excuses what James did. This crime could have possibly been prevented if the police had taken Tiana seriously. I believe she had more than enough evidence to prove that James was a threat to her well-being, and unfortunately, this is the struggle that many women face when trying to seek protection. Tiana's father ended up suing the police for the mishandling of Tiana's case, and claimed that they played a part in her wrongful death due to their negligence. He ultimately won the case and was awarded $10 million to her estate. Tiana's family became very active in the fight against domestic violence, hoping to spare other families from the pain they now have to carry with them every day. They established a foundation called the Tiana Foundation, and it is their hope to inspire other states to take domestic violence more seriously by implementing better laws and forms of protection for victims of domestic abuse and harassment. A GPS monitor was created, inspired by Tiana's case, to help pinpoint an abuser's location. This will allow the victim to be notified when their abuser is within a certain radius of their location. Although it shouldn't fall on the victim to keep themselves safe, this device would be helpful because it would allow victims the ability to seek help or even leave if their attacker got too close. It is always somewhat comforting to see positive changes happen, and it's heartbreaking that it takes cases like Tiana's to provide victims with more protection, but at the end of the day, it's better that something somewhat good can come from a situation like this rather than nothing at all. It is also good to know that there is one less abuser out on the streets, and I'm glad that Tiana's family can have the peace of knowing that there was justice for her. I'm going to leave some resources in the description box about domestic violence, as well as the link to Tiana's foundation. Thank you for taking the time to listen to her story, and please give this video a like to help boost it on YouTube. Subscribe if you aren't already, and I'll be back in a few days with another video, so turn on your post notifications so that you'll be notified when I upload, and I will catch you in the next video.